Most people believe a house is an investment. That belief produces financial paralysis, not because they lack discipline or intelligence, but because they are positioned to consume rather than control. This is not a motivational discussion. This is an explanation of how wealth is destroyed through structural misalignment. A primary residence is not an asset. It is an expense disguised as security. The average person spends 30 years convinced they are building equity, when in reality they are funding a system designed to keep capital locked, illiquid, and unproductive. The mathematics are simple. A $400,000 house costs $1.45 million over 30 years when you include interest, property taxes, maintenance, and insurance. You pay nearly 4 times the original price for an asset that appreciates slower than inflation and generates zero income. This is not wealth accumulation. This is wealth erosion with paperwork. The system tells you renting is throwing money away. The system is correct, but not for the reason you think. Being house poor is not the failure. Believing ownership equals wealth is. Income does not create security. Position does. You can earn $200,000 per year and still be economically weak if that income is deployed into structures that consume rather than compound. A mortgage is not a forced savings plan. It is a forced consumption plan with interest. The psychological comfort of ownership feels like progress. It is not. It is the illusion of control traded for actual leverage. You own a structure that you cannot move, cannot liquidate without losing 6% to transaction costs, and cannot redeploy without triggering a complete financial reset. This is not stability. This is rigidity. Effort fails without leverage because effort is finite and systems are not. You can work harder, save more aggressively, and sacrifice consistently, and still arrive at the same outcome if the structure you are operating within rewards dependency over ownership. Most advice tells you to buy as soon as possible. Most advice is designed to keep you positionally weak. The real estate industry, the mortgage industry, and the financial planning industry all benefit from your belief that a primary residence is the foundation of wealth. It is the foundation of their wealth, not yours. The mistake is simple. You optimize for comfort instead of control. Comfort feels safe, feels permanent, feels like you are doing what responsible adults do. It is none of those things. Control means optionality. Optionality means the ability to move capital, relocate geographically, and seize higher yield opportunities without penalty. When you lock the majority of your net worth into a single, illiquid, depreciating structure, you sacrifice optionality. You trade mobility for pride of place. Pride of place does not compound. Here is what actually happens. You save for a down payment. You qualify for a mortgage. You buy a house in a neighborhood you can afford, which is rarely a neighborhood positioned for aggressive appreciation. Now your cash flow is consumed. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, HOA fees, all of it is outflow with zero return. You tell yourself you are building equity. You are, slowly, at a rate that barely matches inflation if you are fortunate. Meanwhile, the liquidity you could have used to invest in income-producing assets is now locked inside drywall and a roof that will need replacement in 15 years. You are house rich and cash poor. This is not a position of strength. If the market crashes, your equity evaporates. If you lose your job, you cannot access the equity without selling at a loss or taking on more debt. If a better opportunity emerges across the country, you cannot move without losing months and tens of thousands of dollars to transaction costs. This is fragility disguised as security. The structure does not care about your intentions. It does not care that you believe you are making a smart financial decision. Structures reward those who understand leverage. They punish those who confuse consumption with investment. A house is consumption. It sits. It decays. It demands capital for upkeep and taxation. An investment generates income or appreciates at a rate that exceeds the cost of holding it. A primary residence does neither. You are not investing. You are renting capital from a bank at interest, using it to purchase a depreciating structure, and calling it wealth because the alternative, acknowledging that you are economically positioned for stagnation, is uncomfortable. Comfort is the enemy of capital velocity. The moment you prioritize how a decision feels over how it positions you, you have already lost. Not because feelings are irrelevant, but because systems do not respond to feelings. They respond to structure. And your structure is designed to keep you dependent, immobile, and convinced that ownership of a home is the ultimate financial achievement. It is not. It is the ceiling. Before we talk about growth, we have to talk about your cage. Most people are watching this from a living room they don't truly own, in a city that is economically stagnant, convinced that staying put is a strategy. It isn't. In 2026, the world doesn't reward loyalty to a zip code. It rewards the ability to liquidate and leave. If you are fixed in place, you are a target. Movement is the prerequisite for wealth. But movement is impossible when your obligations, that 30-year mortgage, those property taxes, that maintenance schedule, exceed your capacity to pivot. When your fixed costs consume the majority of your income, you cannot respond to opportunity. You are locked. This is not abstract philosophy. It is mechanical reality. Imagine a job offer appears tomorrow in a different city with 40% higher compensation. For the person who rents, this is a yes within 24 hours because they have optionality. For the homeowner, it is a financial catastrophe. You lose 6% to real estate commissions. You lose tens of thousands to transaction costs. You lose the opportunity because your structure will not allow the move without a penalty. At that point, the opportunity costs you money. Power is the ability to act without asking for permission from a bank, a buyer, or a market timeline. Flexibility is not about avoiding commitment. It is about ensuring that your commitments increase your leverage rather than your maintenance requirements. The system rewards those who can move toward value. It punishes those who are fixed in place, waiting for their specific market to align. Most people hear the term cash flow and imagine a dry spreadsheet or a corporate ledger. I want you to imagine a countdown clock. Stop the video right now and perform a clinical audit of your life. If your primary source of income vanished this evening, how many months or weeks could you survive before the bank takes your asset back? If that answer is less than 6 months, you aren't building an empire. You are managing a slow-motion catastrophe. You don't have security. You have a fragile structure waiting for a market correction to act as your executioner. Wealth does not begin with investment. It begins with the absolute control of every cent that enters your orbit. This is the phase the impatient skip because they are desperate to own something to satisfy their ego. But ownership without liquidity is just debt with a more prestigious title. You must understand that $1 spent on property taxes, HOA fees, insurance, or a new roof is $1 that has been permanently executed. It is gone. It returns zero capital. It does not compound. It only maintains a decaying structure. The financial system wants your capital locked in drywall and shingles because locked capital is obedient, predictable capital. But the wealthy understand that capital velocity matters more than the total number on your net worth statement. A person with $50,000 in liquid assets who can redeploy that cash into a mispriced business or a market dislocation has more actual power than a person with $200,000 trapped in home equity. The second person has a large number on a piece of paper. The first person has a weapon. Liquidity is not a safety net for the timid. It is the essential precondition for leverage. You cannot capitalize on a generational market crash if your entire net worth is tied up in the very asset class that is crashing. When you control your cash flow, volatility becomes your greatest ally. When you don't, volatility is a threat to your very existence. Position yourself so that when the world panics, you are the one providing the liquidity at a premium. Income is not wealth. Income is fuel. Most of you are currently operating as high-earning poor. You celebrate a $150,000 salary as if you've won the game. But I look at your structure, and I see a pass-through entity for the bank. You make 6 figures, yet you are positionally weaker than a tradesman making half that amount. Why? Because your income is immediately converted into lifestyle inflation, mortgage interest, and consumptive debt. You haven't built a fortress. You've built a treadmill that requires you to run faster every year just to stay in the same place. Stop optimizing for titles and raises. Start optimizing for delta, the spread between what enters your account and what is required to maintain your existence. If you earn $200,000 but your delta is only 5%, you are an economic slave to your own overhead. A person with a $60,000 income and a 30% delta will outpace you, outinvest you, and eventually own the systems you work for. In the eyes of the market, your status symbols are just liabilities with leather seats. Selling your time is a temporary solution to a permanent problem. Time is finite. Systems are not. If your entire financial structure depends on your continuous presence, you do not have security. You have a job, and a job is the highest risk position you can hold because it has a single point of failure: you. True wealth is the delta between your income and your expenses deployed into structures that compound while you sleep. Perform an ego audit tonight. Look at your bank statement and subtract every dollar that is pre-spent on your house, your cars, and your social validation. What is left is your only real weapon in the war for optionality. If that number is small, your high income is a mask, not a tool. The wealthy do not work for money. They work to build the delta that buys them freedom from the very work they are doing. Effort ends. Ownership continues. This is the line most never cross. Not because they cannot, but because they are conditioned to believe that income from labor is more legitimate than income from systems. It is not. Labor income is capped by time. System income is capped only by scale. When you own a structure that produces value independently of your hours, you have created leverage. When you trade hours for dollars, you have created a job. One of these compounds, the other depletes. The psychological barrier is real. Ownership feels risky because it requires capital deployment into assets that may fail. Employment feels safe because the paycheck arrives regardless of whether you built anything permanent. This is backward. Employment is the highest risk position because your entire economic output depends on a single entity's willingness to continue paying you. One restructuring, one recession, one shift in priorities, and the income disappears. Ownership distributes risk across systems. Employment concentrates risk into a single point of failure. The shift from effort to ownership is not about abandoning work. It is about ensuring that work creates assets rather than simply generating income that evaporates into consumption. A business is ownership. A portfolio of index funds is ownership. A rental property that cash flows is ownership. A primary residence is not. Ownership changes time because time is no longer the variable that determines income. The system produces whether you are working, sleeping, or traveling. This is not passive income mythology. This is structural reality. A person who owns a business that generates $8,000 per month in profit has $96,000 per year in income that does not require their continuous presence. A person who earns $96,000 per year from a salary has income that stops the moment they stop working. Both have the same annual number. One has leverage. The other has dependency. Most people never make this transition because the initial capital requirement feels insurmountable. It is not. A $15,000 investment into a cash-flowing asset is achievable for someone who has controlled expenses and prioritized surplus over lifestyle. A $15,000 down payment on a $400,000 house that consumes $3,000 per month is the default path. One creates income, the other creates obligation. The choice is structural, not circumstantial. Ownership is not reserved for the wealthy. It is how people become wealthy. The system does not care whether you feel ready. It rewards those who position themselves to own, and it extracts from those who remain dependent on selling time. Instability forces poor decisions. Resilience removes urgency. This is the phase that determines whether risk becomes leverage or whether it becomes catastrophe. Safety must precede risk because risk taken from a position of weakness is not strategic. It is desperation. Desperation closes doors. Resilience opens them. A person with 6 months of liquid expenses saved can weather a job loss without panic. A person with no buffer must accept the first available option, regardless of whether it positions them well. One has optionality, the other has compliance. The defensive structure is not about pessimism. It is about removing the conditions that force suboptimal decisions under pressure. When you have liquidity, you can wait. When you can wait, you can negotiate. When you can negotiate, you can choose positions that favor long-term compounding over short-term survival. A $600,000 house is a liability in a market crash because it cannot be converted into cash without triggering a loss. You cannot sell half of it. You cannot redeploy 20% of it into a better opportunity. It sits, you hope. Hope is not a structure. $3 million in liquid investments provides a defensive cushion that allows for survival during downturns and calculated risk during dislocations. When the market crashes and quality assets are mispriced, the person with liquidity can buy. The person with equity in a house can only watch. This is not theoretical. 2008 created generational wealth for those with cash and destroyed stability for those who were overextended in real estate. The difference was not intelligence or foresight. It was position. Defensive structure means prioritizing liquidity in the accumulation phase so that when volatility arrives, it becomes an advantage rather than a threat. Panic destroys compounding because panic forces early exits, forced sales, and high-interest debt to cover shortfalls. A person with 12 months of expenses and liquid reserves does not panic when income drops. They adjust, they wait, they position. A person with no reserves and a $2,800 mortgage payment panics immediately. Panic is expensive. The cost is not just financial. It is positional. Every decision made under duress is a decision made from weakness. Weakness compounds negatively just as strength compounds positively. The goal of the defensive structure is to ensure that you are never forced to make a decision because you have no other option. Optionality is the outcome of resilience. Resilience is the outcome of liquidity. This is why the wealthy hold cash even when it appears suboptimal. They are not trying to maximize returns in every moment. They are trying to maximize position across all scenarios. The person who is never forced to sell is the person who wins. Risk is only dangerous when taken from weakness. From strength, it becomes leverage. This is the final repositioning. Patience is a weapon because patience allows you to wait for asymmetry, moments when the potential upside dramatically exceeds the downside. Impatience forces you to act when the opportunity is mediocre. Patience allows you to act when the opportunity is obvious. Timing matters because the same action taken at different moments produces entirely different outcomes. Buying real estate in 2006 was a structural error. Buying real estate in 2010 was a generational opportunity. The asset was the same. The position was not. Most people buy real estate when they feel ready, when they have saved enough for a down payment, when societal pressure and family expectations align. This is emotional timing. Emotional timing is expensive. Strategic timing waits for market dislocation, for motivated sellers, for conditions that create pricing inefficiencies. You only buy real estate when you can house hack, when the property produces income that covers the mortgage and creates cash flow. Or you wait until you have accumulated enough wealth to buy with cash, without sacrificing growth capital. Buying a primary residence with a mortgage in a stable market is not investing. It is consuming with debt. Buying a duplex, living in one unit, and renting the other to cover 80% of your housing cost is positioning. One locks capital. The other creates leverage. The offensive position is not about aggression. It is about selectivity. You do not take every opportunity. You take the opportunities where structure, timing, and capital align to create asymmetric returns. A person with $200,000 in liquid assets and no mortgage can deploy $100,000 into a business acquisition during a recession when valuations are compressed. A person with $200,000 in home equity and a $3,200 mortgage cannot. Same net worth, different leverage. This is why the shift from ownership of structures to ownership of systems is not semantic. Structures depreciate and demand maintenance. Systems scale and compound. The wealthy do not buy houses to live in until they can buy them without opportunity cost. Until that point, they rent and deploy capital into income-producing assets. This is not deprivation. This is discipline. The system does not reward those who act emotionally. It rewards those who act structurally. Offensive positioning means being in a place where when the moment arrives, you can move. Most people spend their entire lives waiting for the moment, but never positioning themselves to capitalize on it. The moment comes, they watch. Not because they lack desire, but because they lacked position. Position compounds, whether you act or not. Most people fail here, not because this is difficult, but because it is uncomfortable. The structure is clear, the logic is sound, the execution is simple, and yet the majority will revert to the default path within 90 days. This is not a character flaw. This is a predictable outcome when social pressure exceeds structural conviction. Comfort relapse is the first failure point. You begin controlling expenses. You stop upgrading your car every 3 years. You rent instead of buying. Then someone asks why you are still renting. Then someone asks why you drive that. Then someone implies that financial discipline is deprivation. You feel the pressure, you adjust. Not because the logic changed, but because the discomfort of being different exceeded your tolerance for being correct. Comfort is seductive because it is immediate. Position is delayed. The person who chooses comfort today will spend the next 20 years wondering why others advanced while they stagnated. The answer is simple. They optimized for how they appeared rather than how they were positioned. Impatience is the second failure point. You control cash flow for 6 months. You accumulate $12,000 in liquid savings. You see no dramatic change in your circumstances. You conclude the system does not work. It does. You quit before compounding began. Compounding is not linear. The first 3 years produce minimal visible results. The next 7 produce exponential returns. Most people evaluate progress quarterly. Structures evaluate progress across decades. The mismatch creates abandonment. You wanted the outcome without the duration. You wanted leverage without patience. This is not how systems operate. Comparison is the third failure point. You follow the structure. You see someone else buy a house, start a business, or make an aggressive investment. You feel left behind. You are not. You are watching someone else's timeline and assuming it should be yours. Their risk tolerance is not yours. Their capital base is not yours. Their obligations are not yours. Comparison is irrelevant because position is individual. The person who buys a house at 25 may arrive at 35 with equity and no liquidity. The person who rents and invests may arrive at 35 with a portfolio that produces income. Both made a choice. Only one made a structural choice. The outcome is not visible in year 3. It is visible in year 15. But by year 15, the person who chose poorly has spent a decade justifying the decision rather than correcting the position. These are the 3 recurring failures: social discomfort, impatience, comparison. None of them are insurmountable. All of them are predictable. The system does not accommodate feelings. It accommodates structure. If you revert, you revert. The explanation will not change. Time does not pause. Structures compound whether you act or not. This is not motivational rhetoric. This is mechanical inevitability. Every month you delay controlling cash flow is a month of lost compounding. Every year you remain in a high-cost, low-optionality position is a year your peers create separation. The cost of delay is not static. It is exponential. A person who begins investing $1,500 per month at age 25 will have approximately $3.3 million by age 55 at a 10% return. A person who begins investing the same amount at age 35 will have $1.1 million. Same contribution, same rate, 10-year delay. The difference is $2.2 million. That is the cost of comfort. That is the cost of waiting until you feel ready. You will never feel ready. Readiness is not an emotion. It is a position. The person who waits for certainty will wait forever because certainty does not exist in systems that involve risk. What exists is probability. What exists is structure. And structure favors those who position early, even imperfectly, over those who wait for ideal conditions. Path dependency means that the decisions you make today determine the options available to you in 5 years. If you lock capital into a primary residence today, you cannot deploy that capital into a business opportunity in 3 years. The opportunity will arrive. You will not be positioned to take it. Not because you lacked information, but because you locked yourself into a structure that prioritized comfort over control. The person who remains liquid has options. The person who is illiquid has obligations. Options appreciate. Obligations depreciate. This is not abstract philosophy. This is the difference between arriving at 50 with $4 million in investable assets and arriving at 50 with $600,000 in home equity and no cash flow. Both worked hard, both saved diligently. One understood structure, the other understood tradition. The outcome gap is not closed by effort. It is determined by position. And position is established now, not later. Later is when you experience the consequence of the position you are in now. The system does not wait for you to be ready. It moves. This outcome is not a matter of desire. It is a matter of position. You will arrive somewhere. The question is whether you chose where. Most people drift into their financial position by accepting the default path, the expected sequence, the structure that society prescribes. Buy a house, get a mortgage, pay it off, retire. This is not a strategy. This is a script written by institutions that profit from your compliance. You can follow it. Millions do. They arrive at 65 with a paid-off house and a small retirement account, convinced they did everything right. They did everything expected. That is not the same thing. The alternative is simple. Control cash flow. Prioritize liquidity. Deploy capital into ownership. Build resilience before taking risk. Wait for asymmetry. This is not complex. It is uncomfortable. Discomfort is the price of optionality. Comfort is the price of dependency. You will pay one of these prices. The choice is not whether to sacrifice. The choice is what you sacrifice for. The person who sacrifices upgrades, status, and social validation in their 20s and 30s arrives at their 40s with control. The person who sacrifices optionality for comfort arrives at their 40s with obligations. Both sacrificed. One chose position. The system does not pause. Position compounds, whether you act or not.